I wasn't meant to overhear the conversation that would change everything. Standing outside my father's study, I froze at the sound of my name, my hand still raised to knock. Through the gap in the door, I could see my sister Sarah perched on the leather armchair. Her perfect posture a stark contrast to her husband Jackson's lounging stance beside her. "Alara's college fund is the most practical solution," my father said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of finality. "The art school tuition would have been wasted anyway." My mother's bangles clinked as she gestured. "Conrad's right. Sarah's business plan is solid. This investment could secure both your futures." I pressed my palm against the wall to steady myself, the cool surface grounding me as my world tilted sideways. The fund I'd spent years building through summer jobs and careful saving. Gone just like that. "Are you sure she'll understand?" Sarah's voice held a note of concern that might have fooled someone who didn't know her better. "I mean, she's been talking about that art school forever." "Your sister will adjust," my father replied. "She always does." I pushed the door open, making them all jump. "Were you planning to tell me, or would I have found out when my tuition check bounced?" "Alara." My mother stood, smoothing her silk blouse. "We were going to discuss this with you properly." "When?" "After you'd already signed everything over to Sarah." Jackson straightened, flashing that practiced smile. "Look, kid, sometimes in business you have to make tough decisions. Your sister's startup has real potential. Don't call me kid." I turned to my father, who remained behind his desk, expression unchanging. "This is my money. I worked for it." "A portion of it, yes," he said. "But the bulk came from family funds, which I have the authority to reallocate as needed. Sarah's venture is a sound investment. Your art, it's a hobby, Alara. It's time to be realistic." The familiar ache of being the family disappointment twisted in my chest. Realistic? Like Sarah's 3 failed businesses were realistic? Or maybe like Jackson's can't-miss cryptocurrency scheme last year? "That's enough." My father's voice sharpened. "The decision is made. Perhaps this will motivate you to consider a more practical career path." Sarah stood, reaching for my arm. "Oh, please. I promise once the business takes off." I jerked away from her touch. "Save it. You've always been really good at promises, Sarah. Following through? Not so much." My mother stepped forward, arms outstretched. "Darling, please try to understand. Family has to support each other." "Support?" I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "Is that what you call this?" I backed toward the door, taking in their faces one last time. My father's stern disapproval, my mother's practiced concern. Sarah's perfect mask of sisterly worry, and Jackson's barely concealed smirk. In that moment, I saw them all clearly for the first time. "You know what? Keep the money. All of it. But remember this moment, because things are going to change. And when they do, don't expect me to understand or support or adjust. Not anymore." I turned and walked out, ignoring my mother's calls. As I climbed the stairs to my room, my grandmother's words from last week echoed in my mind. Sometimes the worst betrayals come gift-wrapped in family loyalty. I hadn't understood then. I did now. Grandmother Miriam's Victorian house smelled like oil paints and coffee when I arrived with my hastily packed bags. She took one look at my face and wordlessly pulled me into her studio, where an empty canvas waited on the easel. "Paint it out," she said, pressing a brush into my hand. "I'll make us some tea." I stared at the white expanse until colors began flowing, dark reds and blacks, angry strokes that barely resembled anything. I was halfway through when the doorbell rang. Sarah's voice drifted up from downstairs, and my brush froze mid-stroke. "Alara?" Miriam called. "Your sister's here." Should I send her up? I wiped my hands on my paint-stained jeans. Might as well get it over with. Sarah appeared in the doorway, perfectly put together as always in her designer outfit. "You're being dramatic, Elle. Running away to Grandma's like we're in some teen movie." "Dramatic." I turned back to my canvas, adding another slash of red. "That's rich, coming from the queen of drama herself. I came to talk sense into you." She perched on the window seat, wrinkling her nose at the paint fumes. "Dad's furious. Mom's beside herself. Just come home, apologize, and we can work something out." "Work something out?" The brush clattered as I dropped it. "Like how you worked out taking my college fund. That money is going to benefit all of us," she insisted. "Jackson has connections. This business venture." "Stop." I faced her fully. "Just stop pretending this is about family. You saw an opportunity and took it, just like always. The golden child gets whatever she wants." Something flickered across her face, guilt, maybe, or fear. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Dad's expectations, Jackson's plans." "You're right. I don't understand. I don't understand how my sister could steal my future and act like she's doing me a favor. It's not stealing if. If what? If Dad approves? If it serves the mighty Winslow family legacy. I grabbed a rag, wiping paint from my hands with sharp, angry motions. Did you even think about me at all? Sarah stood, smoothing her skirt. Of course I did. I thought about how you're wasting your potential on this. She gestured at my paintings. Art doesn't pay bills, Elle. I'm trying to build something real. Real. I laughed. Like your boutique that lasted 3 months? Or that wellness coaching scam you tried last year? Those were learning experiences, she snapped, her perfect facade cracking. And at least I'm trying to make something of myself, not hiding in Grandma's attic playing with paints. Get out. Elle. Get out. She reached for her purse, then paused. You know what your problem is? You're so busy feeling sorry for yourself that you can't see opportunities right in front of you. Join the business. Work with me and Jackson. Be part of something bigger than what? Than my childish dreams. I picked up my brush again, turning to the canvas. The answer is no. Now leave before I paint you into this mess, though you might actually look better in abstract. I heard her heels clicking away, then Miriam's voice downstairs, too low to make out the words. When the front door finally closed, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Miriam appeared in the doorway, 2 steaming mugs in her hands. Well, that sounded productive. She hasn't changed since we were kids, I said, accepting the tea. Still thinks she can smile and manipulate her way through anything. Miriam studied my painting, head tilted. Interesting use of red. Very violent. That's how betrayal feels. I touched the wet paint, letting it stain my fingertip. But I'm done being the family doormat. I'm going to find a way to make this work, my way. Good, Miriam smiled, a glint in her eye I'd never seen before. Because I have a proposition for you. Miriam's proposition turned out to be more explosive than I'd imagined. She'd handed me a manila envelope containing bank statements, loan documents, and emails. A paper trail that painted a devastating picture of my family's true financial state. Your father's company is hemorrhaging money, Miriam said as I spread the documents across her kitchen table. Has been for years. Those society parties, Sarah's failed ventures, your mother's spending habits, it's all smoke and mirrors. I stared at the numbers, my hands shaking. How did you get these? I may be old, but I'm not stupid. I've been watching Jackson since the day he married your sister. She tapped a document showing recent transfers. See these? Your college fund wasn't invested in Sarah's business. It went straight to covering margin calls on some very risky investments. The kitchen suddenly felt too small. Does Sarah know? I doubt it. She's too busy playing entrepreneur to notice she's being played. Miriam poured more coffee into my cup. Jackson's been systematically draining your family's resources, using Sarah's name to access accounts. Taking advantage of your father's desperation to maintain appearances. A text lit up my phone. Sarah, again. Need to talk. Important. Meet me at Café Laurent. Go, Miriam said, reading over my shoulder. But remember what you know now. The cafe was crowded when I arrived, but I spotted Sarah immediately, her perfect posture a beacon of privilege even here. She wasn't alone. Jackson sat beside her, his arm draped possessively across her shoulders. Elle, thanks for coming. Sarah's smile was brittle. We wanted to discuss your future. My future? I settled into the chair across from them, noting how Jackson's fingers drummed against the table, a tell I'd noticed whenever he was working an angle. We've been talking, he said, leaning forward, and we think we can help you. There's a position opening up in our new venture. Entry level, but with real potential. What kind of position? Administrative assistant, Sarah jumped in. You'd be working directly with me, learning the business from the ground up. I took a slow sip of water, remembering the documents spread across Miriam's table. And what business is that, exactly? We're acquiring distressed properties, Jackson said smoothly. Renovating them for profit. Your artistic eye could be valuable for the design aspects. Interesting timing, I said, considering the real estate market's current state. Something flickered in Jackson's eyes, surprise, maybe concern. What do you mean? Just that property values in this area have dropped significantly. Seems risky. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. How would you know about? I've been doing research. I cut in, watching Jackson's fingers drum faster. Lots of research. Look, kid. Jackson's voice hardened slightly. This is a legitimate opportunity. But if you're not interested... Oh, I'm interested. I stood, placing my palms flat on the table. I'm interested in how you convinced my father to sink his company's emergency reserves into your schemes. I'm interested in where my college fund really went. And I'm really interested in what the SEC would think about your creative accounting. Sarah's face went pale. Elle, what are you talking about? Ask your husband. I grabbed my bag. Or better yet, ask Dad why he's been selling off assets to cover Jackson's losses. You don't know what you're dealing with, Jackson warned, all pretense gone. Neither do you. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Sarah? You might want to check those joint accounts you opened. The ones Jackson insisted would simplify your finances? I'd do it soon. Very soon. Walking away, I heard Sarah's confused questions and Jackson's increasingly defensive responses. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. For the first time since that day in my father's study, I felt powerful. Miriam was right. Knowledge wasn't just power, it was ammunition. The fallout came faster than I expected. 3 days after the cafe confrontation, I found Sarah on Miriam's doorstep at midnight, mascara streaking her cheeks. Behind her sat 2 designer suitcases. He cleaned out our accounts, she said, voice cracking. Everything's gone. I let her in, watching her collapse onto Miriam's antique sofa. When? This morning. I went to buy coffee and my card was declined. She laughed, a hollow sound. Can you believe that? I couldn't even buy coffee. Miriam appeared in her silk robe, taking in the scene. I'll make tea. I don't want tea, Sarah snapped, then immediately deflated. I'm sorry, Grandma. I don't know what to do. I perched on the armchair, studying my sister. The perfect mask had cracked, revealing something I'd never seen before, fear. Did you talk to Dad? He won't take my calls. Sarah twisted her wedding ring. Mom says he's handling it, whatever that means. But I heard her crying in the bathroom. Miriam returned with 3 steaming mugs and a folder. Perhaps it's time we showed her, Alara. I hesitated, but Sarah was already reaching for the documents. As she read, her face went from pale to ashen. This can't be right, she whispered. Dad's company. Our house. Everything. Jackson's been planning this for years, I said. You were just his way in. She looked up sharply. You knew. You knew and you didn't tell me. Would you have believed me? I met her gaze. When have you ever believed anything that didn't fit your perfect narrative? Girls, Miriam interrupted softly. The past won't help us now. We need to focus on what comes next. What comes next? Sarah's laugh was bitter. My husband's gone, my money's gone, our family's falling apart. What could possibly come next? I stood, walking to the window. Outside, the city lights blurred in the rain. We could let it all burn down. Watch Jackson destroy everything and walk away with the ashes. Or, Sarah's voice was small, or we fight back. I turned to face them. But if we do this, we do it my way. No more family politics, no more golden child versus black sheep. Just truth. Your way. Sarah set down her tea. What does that mean? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The image that appeared made my blood run cold. A photo of my art school application, sitting on what was clearly Jackson's desk. He's at the house, I said. In Dad's study. Sarah stood, peering at the phone. Why would he? Because he knows we have evidence against him. I deleted the message. He's looking for the originals. But why your art school application? Because that's not all it is. I met Miriam's knowing gaze. The application was a cover. I've been gathering proof, building a case. Everything's hidden in plain sight, disguised as portfolio pieces and essays. Sarah sank back down. You've been planning this? I learned from the best. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. You taught me well, sis. Always have a backup plan, right? The silence stretched between us until Miriam cleared her throat. The question isn't what Alara's been planning. The question is, are you ready to help her, Serafina? Sarah looked from me to Miriam, then back to the documents in her lap. Finally, she slipped off her wedding ring and placed it on the coffee table. Tell me what you need me to do. First, I said, you need to understand something. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about justice. And justice isn't always pretty. Neither is family, Miriam added quietly. But here we are. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, and I watched my sister's reflection in the window, wondering if I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life, or finally set things right. The art school acceptance letter arrived the same morning as the news about Dad's arrest. I stood in Miriam's kitchen, clutching both pieces of paper, while Sarah paced behind me. Securities fraud, she read from her phone. Embezzlement. Dad's face is all over the financial news. She paused. Jackson's name isn't mentioned anywhere. Of course not. I set down the acceptance letter. He made sure Dad would take the fall. The police are at the house, Miriam said, hanging up her phone. Your mother's hysterical. They're seizing computers, files. My portfolio. The realization hit like ice water. All the evidence is hidden in my artwork at the house. Sarah grabbed her keys. I'll drive. We arrived to find police cars lining our circular driveway. Mom stood on the front steps in her silk robe, mascara streaking her face as officers carried boxes past her. When she saw us, her expression hardened. You, she pointed at me. This is your fault. If you hadn't started digging. If I hadn't started digging, Jackson would have taken everything anyway. I pushed past her, heading for the stairs. An officer blocked my path. Sorry, miss. This is an active crime scene. My art supplies are upstairs. Personal items. You can't just. Actually, we can. A man in a suit appeared, badge glinting. Especially since several of those art pieces contain financial documents hidden in the frames. The room went silent. Mom's hand flew to her throat. What is he talking about, Alara? Ask your son-in-law, I said. He figured it out before you did. Miss Winslow, the detective continued, we'd like you to come downtown to answer some questions. Sarah stepped forward. She's not going anywhere without a lawyer. Interesting you should mention lawyers. He consulted his notebook. Your husband came to us this morning with quite a story. Claims your sister here has been stealing company documents, manipulating evidence. That's ridiculous, Miriam snapped. Is it? Mom's voice was ice. She's always been jealous of Sarah's success. Always trying to prove something. I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make them all flinch. Success? Is that what we're calling it now? Your golden child married a con man who just destroyed our family. But sure, let's talk about my jealousy. Ladies, the detective interrupted. We can continue this discussion downtown. Wait. Sarah pulled out her phone, fingers flying over the screen. Check your email, detective. You'll find recordings of every conversation between Jackson and his partners for the past 3 months, including the one where he planned to frame my father. The detective's phone buzzed. He frowned at the screen. I may have been blind, Sarah continued, but I'm not stupid. Once Alara showed me the truth, I started gathering my own evidence. Mom sank onto the stairs. Sarah, what have you done? The right thing. Finally. She turned to the detective. There's more where that came from. But first, my sister gets immunity. And we need access to her artwork. The real evidence is there, not whatever forgeries Jackson planted. The detective studied us both, then nodded to his officers. Let them upstairs. Supervised. As we climbed the stairs, I whispered to Sarah, why didn't you tell me about the recordings? You're not the only one who can play chess. She squeezed my hand. Besides, some of us learned manipulation at Mom's knee. In my room, I went straight to the large canvas hanging above my bed. My first abstract piece, layers of paint hiding a wealth of damning documents. As I reached for it, Sarah touched my arm. The acceptance letter, she said quietly. What are you going to do? I stared at the painting, seeing beyond the surface to the truth it concealed. First, we take down Jackson. Then I paint my own future. The detective cleared his throat behind us. Time's running out, ladies. No, I said, carefully lifting the canvas from the wall. It's just beginning. 6 months after Dad's arrest. I stood in the gallery surrounded by my work. Paintings that had once hidden evidence now stripped bare and reimagined. The exhibition was my triumph, my declaration of independence. Until I saw them walk in. Mom, wearing her society smile like armor. Dad out on bail, looking smaller in his off-the-rack suit. And between them, Jackson, radiating smug confidence despite the pending investigations. Quite a turnout, he said, approaching my featured piece. A massive canvas of fractured family photographs, distorted and bleeding into chaos. Though I'm surprised they let you keep the originals, considering their evidence. These are new works, I said, keeping my voice steady. The originals are with the FBI. About that. He lowered his voice. Your father's lawyer thinks a deal might be possible. Drop the charges, return certain documents. The family could be whole again. Is that why you're here? To threaten me? To make peace? Mom stepped forward, her perfume too strong in the crowded space. Darling, hasn't this gone far enough? Your father's reputation was destroyed by him. I nodded toward Jackson. Or did you forget who orchestrated everything? Actually, Dad spoke for the first time. Jackson's been instrumental in organizing my defense. He's found investors willing to help rebuild. A laugh escaped me, sharp and bitter. You still don't get it, do you? He's playing you just like before. Where do you think those investors' money will really go? That's enough. Mom gripped my arm. You're making a scene. Good. I pulled away. It's about time someone did. Think carefully, Alara. Jackson's smile never reached his eyes. Your scholarship, your place in this gallery. Everything can disappear so easily. Ask your sister. My blood froze. What about Sarah? Haven't you heard? She's been having such a difficult time lately. Stress, anxiety. These things can be dangerous in her condition. Before I could respond, Miriam appeared beside me. I believe it's time for you all to leave. Mother. Mom started, but Miriam cut her off. Now, Lillian. Before I call security, or better yet, the detective handling Jackson's case. They left, but Jackson lingered. Beautiful work, truly. Especially that one. He pointed to a small piece in the corner. The only painting that wasn't part of the main exhibition. Sarah always said you had a gift for capturing hidden things. After they were gone, I rushed to the painting he'd indicated. It was an old piece, one I'd done years ago of Sarah in the garden. But something was wrong. The texture was different, the strokes too precise. It's not mine, I whispered. This isn't my painting. Miriam examined it closely. Look at the signature. In the corner, barely visible. Not my usual signature, but a date and time. Tomorrow, midnight. He switched it, I said. He's been in the gallery. Which means the evidence in your other paintings might not be safe either. Miriam's face was grim. Call Sarah. But Sarah didn't answer. Her phone went straight to voicemail, just like it had for the past week. I thought she'd been avoiding me because of the exhibition. Now, he has her. I said, the reality crushing down. That's what he meant about her condition. He knows she's pregnant, and he's using it against us. What are you going to do? I stared at the painting, at the hidden message meant to lure me into what was obviously a trap. Everything I'd worked for was in this gallery. My future, my freedom, my revenge. But Sarah, I'm going to meet him, I said. And this time, one of us isn't walking away. Miriam touched my arm. You know it's a trap. Yes. I pulled out my phone, dialing the detective's number. That's counting on it. The old boathouse loomed dark against the midnight sky, its weathered boards creaking in the wind off the lake. I approached slowly, phone recording in my pocket, wire uncomfortable against my skin. The detective's words echoed in my head. Don't engage. Just get him talking. Sarah's voice drifted out through the broken windows, weak but alive. Alara, don't. Shut up. Jackson's sharp command cut her off. Come in, sister dear. Family reunion time. I pushed open the door. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the roof, illuminating Sarah tied to a chair, her face tear-streaked but defiant. Jackson stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the other holding something I couldn't quite see. The police are coming, I said. Of course they are. He smiled. But they won't find anything here except a tragic accident. Two sisters fighting over family secrets. Maybe one falls into the lake. Maybe both. You really think anyone will believe that? They believed everything else. His grip tightened on Sarah's shoulder. Your father believed I was his savior. Your mother believed I could restore their reputation. Even you believed your little evidence collection would work. Sarah's voice shook. The paintings in the gallery, he switched them all. The real ones are. In a much safer place, Jackson finished. Insurance, let's call it. Now about those FBI files. I don't have them. Don't lie to me. His composure cracked. I know how you work. Hidden compartments, secret panels, you wouldn't trust anyone else to keep them. A floorboard creaked behind me. I didn't turn. You're right. I wouldn't trust anyone else. That's why I gave them to Sarah weeks ago. Jackson laughed. Nice try. But she's been with me. For the past week, Sarah interrupted, strength returning to her voice. But not before that. Not when Alara showed me what you really are. Not when I started recording everything. His face contorted. You're bluffing. The necklace you gave me for our anniversary? Sarah smiled through her tears. Amazing what they can hide in jewelry these days. Every conversation, every threat, every plan, all transmitted directly to my private server. Which the FBI now has access to, I added. Check your phone, Jackson. Breaking news should be hitting right about now. He pulled out his phone with his free hand. As he read, his face drained of color. That's impossible. The accounts were untraceable. Unless you know where to look. Miriam stepped out of the shadows, her cane tapping against the wooden floor. Did you really think you were the first person to try this scheme? I've been protecting this family from men like you for longer than you've been alive. Jackson's hand moved, metal glinting in the moonlight. Stay back. Or what? I took a step forward. You'll shoot us all. Add murder to your fraud charges? You don't understand, he snarled. I built this. Everything I took, I earned. You people with your privilege, your connections, you never appreciated. The gun went off as Sarah threw herself sideways, chair and all. I lunged forward. We crashed together, the gun skittering across the floor. Outside, sirens wailed. You're right, I gasped, pinning him down. We never appreciated what we had. But you taught us something valuable. Yeah, he struggled, but Sarah's recordings had made him sloppy, desperate. What's that? Family isn't about blood or money. I met Sarah's eyes as the police burst in. It's about who you choose to protect. As they led him away, Sarah gripped my hand. I'm sorry. For everything. I know. I helped her up, watching Miriam direct the officers to gather evidence. We both have a lot to make up for. Where do we start? By telling the truth. All of it. Together. 1 year later, I stood in Miriam's studio, helping her sort through old paintings. My latest exhibition had just closed. A series exploring family bonds, healing, and forgiveness that had earned critical acclaim. But this moment, quietly working beside my grandmother, felt more significant than any gallery opening. Found something interesting, Miriam said, pulling a leather-bound journal from behind a stack of canvases. I think it's time you read it. The journal was my grandfather's, a man I'd never met. As I read, my hands trembled. Page after page detailed a familiar story. Family manipulation, financial deceit, broken trust. But it wasn't just a record of pain. It was a blueprint for healing, written in my grandmother's careful annotations in the margins. You knew, I said. All along, you knew this would happen. History has a way of repeating itself. Miriam settled into her favorite chair. But so does strength. The doorbell rang. Sarah entered, her baby bump now visible beneath her simple dress. No more designer labels or perfect poses, just my sister, real and raw and trying. Dad's sentence came through, she said without preamble. 5 years with possibility of parole. I nodded, unsurprised. And Mom? Still in denial. But she's seeing a therapist. Sarah managed a small smile. Baby steps. Speaking of babies, I gestured to the corner where my newest painting stood covered. I finished it. Sarah pulled back the sheet, revealing a portrait of her surrounded by swirling colors. Not the perfect society daughter she'd once been, but the complex, flawed, resilient woman she was becoming. Tears welled in her eyes. It's beautiful, she whispered. But I don't deserve. It's not about deserving. I touched the canvas where the colors merged and separated. It's about becoming. Miriam cleared her throat. There's something else you both should see. She opened the journal to its final pages. Your grandfather didn't just document his struggles. He left something for the future. We read together, details of hidden accounts, investments made decades ago, grown steady and strong like roots beneath the surface. Not a fortune, but enough. Enough for art school, enough for a fresh start, enough for a baby's future. He knew someday the family would need a reset, Miriam explained. A chance to build something new from the ashes of the old. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Sarah asked. Because you needed to find your own strength first. Miriam stood, touching each of our faces in turn. Money without wisdom is what got us here in the first place. Later, as sunset painted Miriam's studio in shades of gold, I added my own entry to the journal. Not about revenge or justice, but about the harder path of reconstruction. About how sometimes the deepest wounds become the strongest bonds. About how family isn't just what you're born into, but what you choose to build. Sarah appeared in the doorway. Jackson's sentencing is next week. Will you come with me? Of course. I closed the journal. But first, I need your help with something. I'm starting an art program for at-risk youth. Kids who need to find their voice. Like we did. Like we're still doing. I smiled. Want to help teach them how to paint their own stories? She picked up a brush, turning it thoughtfully. I think I'd like that. As we began clearing space for the new project, I caught Miriam watching us, satisfaction in her eyes. She'd known all along that true revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about creation. About taking broken pieces and making something beautiful, something true. Something that would last.